At exactly 2:47 in the morning, Brandon Swanson heard his son say two words. "Oh shit." And that was it. No scream, no struggle, no explanation. Just those two words, and then nothing. Brandon Swanson was 19 years old. He was on the phone with his father. They had been talking for 47 minutes, and to this day, no one can explain what he saw. Brandon Swanson was 19 from Marshall, Minnesota, a small agricultural city in the southwestern corner of the state. Quiet streets, farming families, the kind of place where everybody knows your name and nothing much ever happens. He just finished his first year at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, studying wind energy technology. Friends described him as reliable, warm, the kind of kid who called his parents back. He had a scholarship lined up at Iowa Western College in the fall. His whole future was sitting in front of him. Until the early morning hours of May 14, 2008, when Brandon Swanson disappeared into the dark of a Minnesota field and was never seen again. The evening started the way a lot of college end-of-year nights do. May 13, 2008, last day of classes. Brandon and a group of friends gathered at a house in Canby, about 30 miles from home, to celebrate. He had a shot of whiskey, maybe a beer. By all witness accounts, he wasn't drunk, not even close. When he left the party somewhere just after midnight, his friends said he seemed completely fine. The drive home to Marshall should have taken 30 minutes. Brandon knew the route. He took back roads instead of the highway. Not unusual for that area, but it mattered because somewhere on those back roads, in the dark, with no streetlights and no landmarks he could clearly make out, Brandon drove his Chevy Lumina into a ditch. The car wasn't damaged. He wasn't hurt. He just couldn't get the wheels to grip the edge of the road. He was high-centered, stuck. So he did what any 19-year-old would do. He called his parents. Annette and Brian Swanson got into their pickup truck immediately. They told him to stay on the phone. He told them he thought he was near Lind, a small town about 7 miles from home. They headed that direction. They drove. Brandon walked toward lights he could see in the distance. He told his father the lights were from Lind. They weren't. For 47 minutes, Brandon Swanson stayed on the phone with his father. They tried to find each other. Brian flashed the truck's headlights. Brandon flashed his car's lights back. Neither could see the other. Brandon was describing his surroundings. Dark fields, fences, the sound of water nearby. He mentioned crossing fence lines. He said he could hear what sounded like a stream. His father kept him talking. Brandon adjusted, told his father he'd start heading toward Porter instead. Brian began driving that way, and then, at approximately 2:47 a.m., "Oh shit." Brian Swanson waited and waited. He called Brandon's name. No response. The line was still open. He could hear ambient sound, maybe wind, maybe nothing. But Brandon wasn't talking. His parents called back. The phone rang and rang and rang. No answer. Here's the detail that has haunted investigators and Brandon's family ever since. That phone kept ringing for 2 more days after he disappeared. If Brandon had fallen into a river, into cold water on a 40-degree night, the phone would have shorted out immediately, but it kept ringing for 2 days, which means at some point the phone was still intact, still somewhere, just not with anyone answering it. When Brandon didn't come home and didn't answer any calls, his parents drove back out and searched through the remaining dark hours themselves. Nothing. No sign of him anywhere near Lind where they'd been looking. At 6:30 a.m., they called police, the local department's first response. It's not unusual for a young man his age to stay out all night. One officer told them directly, it's his right to be missing. No search was launched, not immediately. The Swansons were told to wait. They waited. Brandon didn't come home. Later that morning, after they pushed harder, authorities finally obtained Brandon's cell phone records, and what those records showed changed everything about the case. Brandon had never been near Lind. His phone was pinging off a tower near Taunton, 25 miles away from where he told his parents he was. 25 miles. He hadn't known where he was, not even close. He was wandering rural fields in the dark, legally blind in one eye without his glasses, which were found later. left in the car. Brandon had been walking through unfamiliar terrain at night, partially blind, toward a light he couldn't correctly identify, while his parents searched for him in the wrong county. By early afternoon, deputies found his Chevy Lumina sitting in a ditch off a gravel road near the Lincoln County line, just north of Highway 68. Doors unlocked, no damage, no signs of struggle, no blood, no torn clothing. The keys were missing. Brandon was not there. Search dogs from Codington County, South Dakota, were brought in. Bloodhounds. They picked up a scent trail from the car and followed it for 3 miles, through fields and fence lines, northwest along gravel roads, out to an abandoned farmstead, and then directly to the Yellow Medicine River. The scent trail ended at the water. The Yellow Medicine River in May 2008 was running fast and deep, in some stretches up to 15 feet. It was cold, barely above freezing. Boats were deployed. Gates were installed downstream to catch anything that might surface. The river was searched extensively. Nothing was found. If Brandon had drowned in the Yellow Medicine River, his body should have surfaced. That's not speculation, that's physics. In rivers of that depth and current, bodies don't stay submerged indefinitely. They surface, sometimes miles downstream. After years of searching, the Yellow Medicine was gradually ruled out, but one of the dogs, after following the scent to the river's edge, crossed to the other side and kept going, followed the scent north along the far bank to a gravel road, and then northeast toward the Yellow Medicine County line. As if Brandon had crossed the river and kept walking. Searches continued through the rest of 2008 and into 2009. Dogs returned to the area repeatedly, and on one of those searches, something new. A dog indicated the scent of human remains near Mud Creek, a tributary of the Yellow Medicine, north and northwest of Porter. Investigators searched, found nothing they could identify. No remains, no clothing, no phone, nothing physical at all. The dog also indicated a scent on nearby farm equipment, not a body, not a burial site, a piece of machinery sitting in an open field. What does that mean? No one is sure. Scent work is interpretive. It tells you something was there, not when, not for how long, not why. 122 square miles were eventually searched. That's not a typo. 122 square miles of fields, riverbanks, drainage ditches, farmsteads, and prairie. Brandon Swanson was in none of it. There's one more detail that doesn't fit any clean narrative. After Brandon disappeared, after the call went silent, his phone continued to ring when called for 2 days. Not a voicemail pickup, an active ring. His phone was somewhere, intact, powered, just never answered. It was never found. Here's the uncomfortable truth about this case. There are no named suspects, no persons of interest, no one investigators formally identified as having a connection to Brandon's disappearance. His friends were interviewed. Accounts were consistent. There were no reported arguments, no threatening encounters, nothing unusual in the hours before he left Canby. The area around Taunton where his car was found is sparse. Farms, grain elevators, gravel roads. The population of the surrounding towns is in the dozens. A random violent encounter at 3 a.m. in the middle of empty Minnesota farmland is, statistically, extraordinarily unlikely. But foul play has never been officially ruled out. And there's one behavioral detail that investigators have never been able to fully account for. Brandon Swanson, who was calm enough to talk to his father for 47 minutes, who was coherent enough to navigate fence lines in the dark, who was oriented enough to recognize that the lights he was heading toward weren't a town, suddenly said 2 words and went silent. Not "I fell," not "I'm hurt," not "oh no." 2 syllables, then nothing. The word shit implies surprise, reaction, something unexpected, something he saw or encountered or fell into, but what? This is the theory law enforcement has leaned toward most heavily. The scent trail led to the Yellow Medicine River. Brandon mentioned hearing water nearby. He was disoriented, partially blind, walking in the dark through unfamiliar terrain in 40-degree weather. The river, in places, dropped to 15 feet. He may have stumbled in without seeing it. The current was fast. "Oh shit" would be exactly what you'd say in the millisecond before hitting cold black water. This explains the sudden silence. It explains why his parents couldn't reach him. It would explain why no trace of him has ever been found on land. But it doesn't explain the phone ringing for 2 more days. and it doesn't fully explain the dog crossing the river and continuing north. If he drowned, why did the scent trail keep going? A secondary version of the accidental death theory. Brandon may have crossed the river or waded through it and made it out the other side. But soaking wet at 40 degrees in a rural Minnesota field is a death sentence. Hypothermia affects the brain quickly. Disorientation, confusion, eventually a strange sensation of warmth, and then nothing. People who die of hypothermia are sometimes found in bizarre locations, curled under a bush, in a drainage ditch, in places searchers walked past multiple times. The dogs followed a trail north after the river crossing, but they lost it. The trail went cold somewhere in those empty fields. 122 square miles and no trace. Hypothermia victims don't simply disappear, but they can end up in places that aren't searched until it's too late. Spring planting may have buried evidence. Flooding may have moved remains. Years have passed. This theory is bleak, but it's coherent. This one comes from local knowledge, people who know the terrain around Porter and Taunton. That region of Minnesota has a number of unmarked, uncovered agricultural cisterns, essentially open pits in the ground used for drainage and water collection. In the dark, without glasses, walking across unfamiliar fields, Brandon might not have seen one. Oh shit. And then a fall into a confined space. If the cistern was deep enough or covered afterward by seasonal flooding or equipment, it might explain why searches turned up nothing. Dogs can't scent what's 15 feet underground and submerged. This theory has never been confirmed or eliminated. Investigators simply couldn't search every hole in 122 square miles of farmland. Some in the true crime community have pointed to the phone ringing for 2 days as the most anomalous fact in the case. If he drowned immediately, the phone should have died immediately. If he fell into a cistern and the phone survived the fall, it would ring, but he couldn't answer. But what if the phone wasn't with him when it was ringing? What if someone else had it? Law enforcement has never publicly named a foul play suspect, but the question remains, if someone else encountered Brandon that night, out there, alone, in the dark, would we know? There are no cameras on gravel roads in rural Lincoln County. There were no witnesses. The silence after those two words is the center of this case, and it remains unexplained. Today, Brandon Swanson's case remains open and unsolved. In 2010, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension took over as the lead agency. The FBI added Brandon to their missing persons list. Tips still come in periodically. None have led anywhere. His phone has never been found. No clothing, no remains, nothing. Brandon would be 37 years old today. His parents, Annette and Brian, turned their grief into legislation. Brandon's law, signed by Governor Tim Pawlenty in May 2009, requires Minnesota law enforcement to immediately begin investigating missing adult cases, regardless of age, rather than assuming voluntary absence. The law passed unanimously in the lower chamber. The Swansons kept their porch light on every night for years, a light in the window, in case Brandon came home. He never did. Brandon was legally blind in one eye. He didn't have his glasses. It was 2:47 in the morning on an unlit county road in rural Minnesota, and he had been walking alone through fields for nearly an hour. Whatever he saw, whatever made him say those words, it had to be close. Close enough to surprise him. Close enough that there was no time to say anything else. What do you think those two words meant? Was this an accident? A kid alone in the dark who didn't see the water? Or was there someone else out there that night? Drop your theory in the comments. We read everyone.